Hello, welcome to MJR RPG. The following review is of The Sentinels, the second scenario in Dark Space, a system-neutral collection of Lovecraftian science fiction horror published by Kabuki Kaiser. Full disclaimer, I did receive a review copy of Dark Space from Kabuki Kaiser. As always, the first chunk of this review will be largely spoiler-free, the second half not so much. In short, The Sentinels is a nasty little trick of a scenario that doesn't actually give players much to do, but it can be worth experiencing without the railroading stinging too much due to its very short runtime. As described in the review for Orpheus Station, the first scenario in the collection, Dark Space is system-agnostic, light on details and heavy on mood. While I ran Orpheus Station with the Cthulhu Dark mothership hack, Darkship, I ran this scenario with straight Cthulhu Dark. This worked much better for me, both because I just prefer Cthulhu Dark in general, and because it better suits this scenario in particular. Slight spoilers, but the scenario is even more mood-based than its predecessor. Getting out of the player's way is the system's main requirement here. With single-column paragraphs, the scenario text takes up 8 pages. Besides the extra cover page, there are no illustrations, and aside on the title art, I quite enjoy all of them. Usually very colorful and abstract portraits on a black background, but unfortunately I do find the Sentinels to have kind of the worst of the lot, instead featuring a muddy image in muted colors. Frequent titles break up the single-column text, leaving at most 4 paragraphs in a row, and more often than not, separating individual paragraphs when describing locations. Despite, or because of, its simplicity, the Sentinels and its sibling scenarios are very readable, with a simple white background and unobtrusive but easily understood system-neutral mechanical bits coded into the text via italics and bolded red text. As is Dark Space's style, the text is largely prose-like rather than purely descriptive. This includes some rather large read-aloud sections. In what I imagine is a deliberate decision, as nearly all these scenarios follow suit, there are no maps or illustrations. This generally isn't an issue, as most of the exploration isn't of the room-to-room, map-out-the-dungeon sort of variety, but I did find myself a little confused by the overall described layout in this specific scenario. Whether this is my lack of reading comprehension or an actual issue with the writing will be up to each GM, as will the Dark Space style overall, and this scenario exemplifies that style to either a great or horrible degree. From the GM side, it reads like a short story. If run by the book, I imagine it feels similar from the player side as well. What might save the scenario from itself is its length. It may be the shortest of the Dark Space scenarios, with my run taking only a little over 2 hours, and I could easily see that halved. The railroading is in full force, but if the GM and players are happy to hop in the train and let the mood take over, the short ride should keep the worst of that format at bay. Being the second scenario in the collection is an odd choice, though. I would suggest putting this midway through as a short diversion, or as an impromptu session filler, as there isn't much prep involved. If that doesn't sound of interest, though, there is unfortunately little opportunity for structural adjustments outside of a full rewrite. More on that in the spoiler section below. Dark Space, containing the Sentinels and its 7 sibling scenarios, can be found on DriveThru RPG in PDF or print-on-demand formats. The following section will be completely full of spoilers, so if you are wanting to play the scenario or just don't want to know what's going on, I would suggest stopping here. This is a rug pull or sort of gotcha scenario. It exists entirely to jab at the players for something they didn't really have a choice in doing. As a little bit of flash fiction, it's fun enough, and with Dark Space's prose-like text, it largely reads as such. But from a player perspective, I'd say how much of a good-natured finger-wagging it gets versus angry fist-waving depends on how long the GM allows the scenario to drag out. To sum it up, the party investigates a signal on Karen, thinking it might be extraterrestrial life. It is. Unfortunately for the clueless, literally there are no clues, investigators, they make an oopsie by opening a door and killing an entire alien civilization. Fast forward past wandering through a barren underground city covered in dust until the party finds a spooky ET computer where they can watch a recording of the last few hours, witnessing the inadvertent genocide. Slide whistle, sad trombone, that's all, folks. Poking around the city takes up most of the playtime, with the party coming across a dozen possible rooms and events. These can be spooky or somber and are nice little scenes, though almost entirely reactive. entirely reactive, as is the full scenario, with the single exception of a room containing random flying polyps that can auto-kill at least 2 player characters and quite possibly cause a TPK, though triggering the monsters requires a player character to summon them. Why they would do this, who knows, as there are plenty of warnings, including an awkward double sand/panic/whatever roll, or quadruple if the things are summoned. But it's in the text anyways, despite not really being clear why the aliens have these insta-kill pets sitting around, or what the scene adds to the scenario in general. Learning a spell to summon flying polyps could help, or more likely not help, at least it'd be funny, in future scenarios, I guess. Unfortunately, I can't think of many ways to open up the scenario without gutting it. The rug pull is the whole point of the scenario, and you can't pull the rug if the players aren't made to patiently stand on it. Poking through an abandoned underground city on Karen is neat, but without the haha you ended a civilization bit, there isn't much to actually do. You could perhaps have the polyps be out and about, having been let free when the aliens turn to dust, turning the scenario into a cat and mouse sort of thing as the party tries to find out what happened while avoiding the spooky monsters. Except that would just be Orpheus Station again. One last thing I want to talk about, and it's not something I usually care to mention or focus on in RPG stuff, but that's plot holes. When it comes to RPG scenarios, I honestly don't care that much about gaps in plotting or jumps in logic, and I certainly don't hold them to the same standards as other media. Giving players opportunities for unique experiences they can take part in together in ways other media can't allow is what I want from an RPG module, and I'm happy to ignore if some NPC motivations or setting details don't really make sense, if it can support the kind of play I'm looking for. But in the Sentinels, there are a few little niggling bits that really do kind of get in the way of play. These almost all come down to the scenario seemingly forgetting it's in a science fiction setting, and the player characters having access to all manner of tech. This comes up in quite a few ways, but the largest, by far, is that the player characters should very easily be able to analyze the dust they find themselves everywhere, and quickly figure out it was people, and recent people at that. Immediately dispelling the twist through pretty basic Star Trek-esque readings that most all science fiction-minded players would try out is not ideal when the twist is the whole point of the scenario. All other criticisms aside, the scenario is moody and the rug pull can be effective. If the GM thinks the group would be up for a very guided session, and the GM can keep that session very brief, there is fun to be had. Those are some strong conditions, though, and when compared to many of the better sibling dark space scenarios, I'm not sure I'd recommend turning to the Sentinels until others are exhausted. For example, Orpheus Station, which also has a everyone turn to dust twist, but with more to do besides just that. Dark Space can again be found on DriveThru RPG in PDF or print-on-demand formats. Thank you for listening. As always, credit to Dark Chamber for use of their album, Cthulhu. Until next time, have a good one.